Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be chatting about the family rhythm. Basically, how do I juggle 4 kids and 4 different grades and being able to accomplish all of those things in one day. And to start off right off the bat, I'm going to just share that one, I've not arrived, I'm not perfect, and I don't get it all done every day, and it doesn't go off flawlessly every single day. So I'm not coming from up on my pedestal saying that I finally figured it all out and I've arrived and I've just got this perfect little homeschool family that accomplishes it all. I am far from it. I have so many faults, so many high dreams, and then we don't accomplish everything, and we have really bad days, and we have good days, and we have days all in between. So by no means am I coming here and saying that I figured out the key to success. I have figured out a few things that have helped along in our own homeschool, and that's basically what I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. So to start off, I just want to share our just general rhythm, like how we go about our day. So we wake up anywhere in the range of 7:30 to 9, between all 5 of us, me and my 4 kids. So we're starting school. My absolute cutoff line is 9 o'clock. So if I have a kiddo who's still sleeping, we might wake them up unless we've had some extraordinary thing going on where I really feel like they might actually need the sleep. We're generally waking up and making sure that we can start our day by 9 o'clock. It's just kind of like my cutoff rule, where we need to be starting by 9 o'clock. So that means in that time they need to have gotten changed and brushed their teeth and had their breakfast and whatever else may be in that day that they've needed to get ready in order to be able to start our day at 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, this is the time at which I start our morning family learning, morning basket time, whatever you want to call it. This is where I'm tackling the subjects that I teach together. And that is Bible, science, history. In the past has been art, poetry, all those things. This year's going to include geography. But those are the subjects that I am teaching all at once to all 4 of them and not on individual levels. I'm not teaching kindergarten geography and 2nd grade geography and, 4th grade Bible and 6th grade Bible and all those different grades. I'm teaching it one level and they're each doing it according to their ability. So one, that is a huge time saver because if I had to teach all those subjects at all those different levels, I would not physically have enough time in my day to be able to tackle all of those grades and all of those different subjects. So after we get done with our morning basket, family learning, whatever you want to call it, time, that is when I move into our individual subjects. So this kind of looks differently each day depending on one, who's ready and who can work without me first. Generally, in this past year, Gabriel has reached an age in which he can get started and is easily motivated to go and work on his own. So when we are done with our family learning, Gabriel takes off and he is doing his own math and his own language. And until he has a question or has a need, I have to grade something, I have to edit something, he's off doing his own work. That has been a huge help in my schedule in that he is just becoming more and more independent as he grows. I've been waiting for this moment. It's like when the clouds open up and it's like, that moment has finally arrived with one of my kids where they're able to do some of the work by themselves, and it's super, super exciting and kind of a weight off your shoulders. So that's one thing. Second is I start with Isaiah generally with math, because if I can read over and go over the lesson with him, then he is able to actually read the problems himself and do his own work independently after I've gone over his lesson. So that is helpful as well, that if I can just get him his lesson, I can kind of okay, now go do it. And that frees me up for the next child. I really do feel like a revolving door, and that I have 1 kid leave and 1 kid enter and 1 kid leave and 1 kid enter, because I only have one of me to be able to teach 4 different kids. And if they all need me at one time, it really is kind of just going from one and bouncing around as much as I can in that short amount of time. Once I get Isaiah done and kind of off to himself, occasionally he might have something else that he needs me for. And if that's the case, then we cover it and we get that done. If, they both, Gabriel and Isaiah both did IEW last year in which they were watching videos. So on those video days, they really didn't need me involved. So again, that was something that I could kind of push them over and say, okay, you need to watch your video. If you have questions, address them to me and we'll handle them when I have a moment. So kind of getting kids who can read and can do a little bit of independent work, that is super helpful. And being able to focus on the younger kids who still need you to read directions and teach all the lessons, and maybe even sit beside them, making sure that they're, writing their letters correctly, or, doing each problem correctly. You have to read each individual problem for them. Those are long days. I totally get it. I still have 1.5 kids who, sometimes need me beside them. One fully does. So those are very time consuming lessons and kiddos. So basically, once I get to those younger kids, it's like I sit down and I knock them out. And then when they're done, they're back to the point in which they're playing. So a lot of times those younger kids are getting some playing time in the beginning of the day while I'm working with the older kids, kind of getting them set up. Then I work with them, and a lot of times, because they have so few subjects and the lessons are very short and concise and, very just basic, they're finished a lot sooner. And so they're often out playing again before the older ones have even finished their day. So I focus on those younger ones, kind of push them back, they're playing again, and then I go back to my older ones. Okay, what do I need to grade? What do I need to edit so that you can finish your day and that you can be done with all of your schoolwork? So I kind of go back to them. At the end of that, then hopefully we're done for the day. In which case, I usually spend like 15-20 minutes maybe prepping and getting anything that I need ready for the next day. Sometimes it's a matter of I need to edit a paper so that tomorrow they can type their final draft, or they can write their final draft, whatever it is. Or it's, grading some papers. But I have a few things. That's basically the rhythm. I have a few things now that I want to share that is like just basic tips, things that I have done over the years that might be helpful to you if you're really struggling. And I feel you, because I have days where we are not wrapping up until right about dinner time. And I'm like, I don't even have anything ready for dinner. Like, what am I going to do? I've been doing school. And it's not that any one of my kids have been doing school for 6 to 7 hours. It's that I've been doing school for 6 to 7 hours because I did 2 with this kid, or 2 with this kid, or 2 and 2. When you are doing it with multiple kids, your time is spent all day, even though they maybe only have done school for 2 to 3 hours. So I totally feel you. So let me share some of those tips that I have for you. So my first tip would be to implement a family learning or morning basket time. And so what that could look like is your Bible, your science, your history, geography, art, poetry, whatever is important in your family, you're doing that together. It is a total time saver. I cannot imagine trying to teach science to 4 different grade levels and history to 4 different grade levels, and them all being different and doing them at separate times. There's just absolutely no way that I could be able to fit that all in my day. The other caveat that I would say with that is doing that first thing, because it is really hard to wrangle kids back in after this kid's gone this way and this kid's playing and this kid's already working on that way. I've had days like that where I've waited for a kid to wake up and I'm like, okay, just go ahead. We'll get you started on this and I'll get you started on this. And then all of a sudden the day's over and I'm like, oh goodness, we forgot to do science or geography or history because we were like already all on our own doing our own things. And so it can be really difficult to wrangle kids back in to tackle that morning family learning. Now, that's not to say that I don't have kids. I do have a couple that are early morning risers, and I have gotten them used to maybe doing a couple of things that are very independent work, whether that is, cursive copy work or a math fact worksheet, or trying to think of something else, but like, you know what I mean? Like those very basic things that might take 10 or 15 minutes maybe to be able to do. But if they're waiting on a kid to wake up, so I have some that are early morning risers and I have some who like to snooze, and if I'd let them, they'd snooze till 11. So I have some who are waking up and they're like chomping at the bit to get started. They want to get going. And I really like to do our family learning time. I don't want to get them pushed off into another direction. So a lot of times I'll set out a couple of worksheets the night before. And like, as we're going to bed, I usually just remind them, hey, if you wake up early and you're looking for something to do and you want to get a head start on your school day so you can finish early, I've set out a couple of worksheets that you can do independently. It's your cursive, it's your fact sheet, whatever it is, go ahead and do it. And then guess what? It's done. And you won't have to do it later in the day, which will allow you to go and play even earlier. A lot of times if I'm selling it to them that way, it's looked at, okay, yeah, if I do this, then I'll be able to play, and they're more apt to do it. So I will have a few very short independent activities that if I'm waiting on someone to wake up and the other kids are just ready to go, I go ahead and let them get started on that particular worksheet or activity or whatever it is. And that kind of helps me not have to wait on them to finish something later in the day as well. I also tend to have these worksheets ready and available for when I'm busy with another kid. So if I have a kid who's ready to get working on something, or they need me for a lesson for me to teach them something, I have them work on those independent worksheets. So if they didn't get them done in the morning, then they have them ready and waiting for them when I'm working with another kid. So if I start my morning off and I'm working with Isaiah, I tend to get Ezra started on his independent worksheets so that, he's either done his meeting strip for math before I even get to him, or he has done his cursive worksheet before I even get to him. So I'm usually as I'm starting with Isaiah, I'm like, okay, Ezra, now's the time. You need to go get your independent work, and you need to work on that meeting strip, math fact worksheet, cursive. You can do all of those things without me. It's time to get those started. And just kind of reminding him, do these things now so that you're not having to do them with me later. Another thing that I have found to be helpful is reading during mealtime. So we do a lot of read alouds, whether it's for history or science or just a generally fun read aloud that I'm trying to, get in for our homeschool, is that I read during mealtime. One, they are busy. They are actively moving their hands. They don't have, they're not distracted by something else, and they've got something in their mouths typically, and they can't talk during that time. So I'm either making sure that I eat my meal before or after them, whatever is lining up, and then while they're eating, I'm reading to them. So if I find that in the morning I just didn't have enough time to squeeze in our history read aloud, then I'm going to read it to them during lunch or dinner, however it works out. So while they're eating their meal, I'm going to go ahead and use that time to go ahead and read aloud to them. Okay, the next little tip that I actually found worked really well when Gabriel was still needing my assistance in his math lesson. So this last year, he actually had kind of a refresher course. He's kind of redoing a similar level. They were different curriculums, but similar in the material that was covered. But I asked him to kind of teach himself. So he was reading the lesson himself, and he was going over all of it on his own, kind of learning how to become independent, teach himself this material on his own. So with that, I totally lost where I was going with that. Oh, I remember. Sorry. Okay, totally left my mind. All right, so before last year and years before, I was always starting my math with him. And I would realize, okay, well, Isaiah couldn't get started because I was already working with Gabriel. And then that just basically set off everyone. Ezra knew he wasn't going to get started for 2 more kids because I had to work with Gabriel, and then I worked with Isaiah and Ezra. And I typically start with my oldest because once I can get the lesson started, I can usually kind of push them aside and say, okay, now I've taught you, go do the work. And the younger I got, I realized I couldn't just teach him a lesson and walk away. I still had to sit with him and read every problem. So I always started with the oldest with the hope that I can kind of get them started and then kind of okay, time to go and work on it on your own. So when I was still teaching Gabriel, I realized that there was one thing that I found that actually helped start our day better. And that was teaching him his math lesson and maybe a language lesson the night before. So when we were wrapping up after dinner, before the bedtime routine and everything, I would sit down and we would just pull out his math, not his notebook or anything that he was going to be doing, any of the problems, just the lesson. So I would teach him his lesson. We would go through all the examples. And then basically, as soon as we started the next morning, he was ready to go. He didn't need me to sit down and to teach him the lesson. I had already learned it, and he was ready to start the problems. In doing so, that allowed me to go ahead and start my morning with Isaiah. And so I was already down 1 kid and ready to start, 1 down the rung without having to work with Gabriel. And I found that actually in that season worked really well. And there have been a couple times where I've actually done that with Isaiah. So if I teach Isaiah his math lesson the night before, then guess what? I can actually work with Ezra first thing the following morning because Isaiah can start on his problems. And so, I think a lot of times we get stuck that we have to do our schoolwork in these, 9 to 5 hours of maybe perhaps a typical school day, and it actually works out that we can actually do some things when dad's home. We can have dad teach a lesson every once in a while so that maybe we can start the next morning maybe ahead of schedule. So don't confine yourself to these typical schedule where you could actually do something the night before and it kind of jumpstart your day in the morning. Another suggestion I have is that if you have older kids who can handle it, you can go ahead and have them teach your younger kids. Oh, I just had a bird fly at my window. It almost crashed in there. Sorry, I had a squirrel moment. Okay. Have older kids teach younger kids. So, yes, you can have your older kids teach your younger kids if they are capable and willing. So a lot of times I'll give Gabriel $1 or $2 to go over Eden's math lesson with her. So if he is willing to do that, if I find that I'm just having a particularly rough day, I will ask him. Sometimes he's willing to do it and he won't even ask for any money. And sometimes he's like, well, I'd do it if you give me $1. And I'm like, it is a very well worth it dollar to spend to have him teach Eden's math. So that is an option. A lot of times I even have him grading Isaiah's math fact worksheet. So he's got 100 math facts, subtraction, addition, multiplication, division. And I have Gabriel grade those. One, because once he got to a certain point in his math lesson or math books, he was no longer doing them. And so I figured it would be a great opportunity for him to still maintain those math facts by grading his younger siblings' worksheets. So he still does that, and that's a non-negotiable. I just have him do it. Same with Isaiah. Isaiah grades Ezra's, and Ezra grades Eden. So I just have each subsequent kid grading the other person's math paper for them. In the same likeness, I've had older siblings listen to younger siblings read. There are times when Gabriel or Isaiah will listen to Ezra do his read aloud time. And at times when we've been near family, I've had them go and read to grandma and grandpa or an aunt or an uncle. And a lot of times they just love that time as well because it's just a special time that they get to have that maybe they normally wouldn't get to. Another option is if you don't even have any family around or older siblings who are able to, watch over and make sure that they're reading correctly, they could even do that over FaceTime. So we have FaceTime where, siblings, or not siblings, but cousins and stuff can, play together over FaceTime, but there wouldn't be any reason that you couldn't also have a FaceTime where a child is maybe reading to a grandma or grandpa. I think a lot of times they enjoy being able to see what the kiddos are learning. Okay, the next piece of advice that I want to share is outsourcing, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what I was just saying. You're outsourcing something to an older sibling, or you're outsourcing something to a grandma or grandpa, but maybe what you can do is outsource a piece of curriculum to a teacher who, teaches that curriculum. For example, in the past year, my kids have been doing IEW, and they watch a video series where Andrew Pudewa is teaching the lesson. I have outsourced the teaching component of IEW to Andrew Pudewa, and it takes that off my plate for Gabriel and Isaiah. And that is a big chunk of my time that I'm getting back because I've outsourced it. I've let someone else take care of it. Now, I shared this in my curriculum video of our upcoming year, that I'm going to give Nicole, the math lady, a try where she covers the lessons for Saxon math. We're going to do the trial period. If I find that it works for the kids, then I'm going to go ahead and do the year subscription service. So you can be on the lookout. I can let you know how that goes for our family, but that is something that I'm willing to try as well, because at this point I'm teaching 4 different levels of math, and that's a lot of time where I go from one kid to the next and to the next and to the next, where my day is just spent bouncing around from each kid. So at any point, if there's something that I feel like I can outsource, have somebody else teach, whether it's through a purchase curriculum or a family member, or It could even be, something like Outschool, where you sign up for like a 6-week program where they're having someone teach them on like a one-on-one class, or, a small virtual classroom. It could be anything like that where you're just outsourcing the teaching to someone else. So that's another idea to help alleviate some of the stress of all the things that you need to care for when you're educating multiple kids all in different grades. So to wrap things up, I just want to reiterate, I certainly haven't figured it all out, haven't arrived. I don't have this perfect homeschool where we finish everything and we've all got smiles on our faces and we never leave anything for the next day because we've just been able to check it all off. That's not our homeschool. There are many days where we're just lucky to even be done by dinner. And I say that to just make you aware that you're not alone. If you're struggling, if you've got multiple kids in multiple different grades and you're just really struggling to find a way to get it all done, you're not alone, 1. But 2, it gets better. So I can see this with my oldest, with Gabriel, in that he is becoming more independent. He is learning how to teach himself. He is taking ownership in his own education. Is it perfect? By no means, but we're getting there. And that's what this is. This is a process. This is a journey over time of teaching our kids how to teach themselves. And to me, that's the ultimate goal in my homeschool, is I want to train my kids how to find the information and to teach themselves in anything. And if I give them those tools, then it doesn't matter what they need to learn. They'll know how to teach themselves. So just remember that it gets better, where we're not always going to be so busy. We're not going to be standing over them, watching them trace letters and reading every single math problem to them. It does get better. And I hope that that is an encouragement to you. So if you have any other questions about our daily rhythm, how we accomplish 4 different grades throughout the day, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm not a pro. I haven't figured it all out and I'm not perfect, but I can certainly offer you any suggestions that I have. And until next time, guys, have a blessed day.